Today, I'm super excited to give you guys a whopping 70 Doctor Who facts from the first 2 Doctor Who seasons that aired in the 1970s. If you're a John Pertwee 3rd Doctor fan, or that just sounds interesting to you, then definitely stick around, because all that and more is coming up today on the Doctor Who Guide.
The best box set that you can buy for Doctor Who.
First off, just look at this shirt. Isn't that awesome? I love that shirt. Anyway, welcome to the Doctor Who Guide. If you're new here and want to grow your Doctor Who knowledge collection and connection with other Doctor Who fans, then definitely consider subscribing. I'm Alex Patterson, and 16 months ago, I was asked by Jay from Jay's Doctor Who Reviews to make a video about 1970s Doctor Who. This week, I have been volunteering at my church's arts and music camp, and so I've just been flat out, so I figured this would be a great video to show you guys. It's got a lot of great information, and if you're a Pertwee fan, I think you're gonna love it. I got a lot of these facts from TARDISWikia.com, so huge shout out and thanks to them, and I also took some from the Who Graphica book. Jay welcomed me into the community, and he was one of the first people I ever collaborated with, so thank you, and definitely check out his channel, which is linked up above and in the description down below. Let's get to fact number 1.
Doctor Who Spearhead from Space. Now, this story is incredible. It's the first story of the 7th season of Doctor Who, and this story also had the working title of Facsimile. Imagine if that had been John Pertwee's first story title. It is the first story that has been filmed on color, which is just brilliant. Studio cameramen were on strike because they wanted to get paid higher wages for operating more technologically advanced color cameras. However, that was only the studio cameramen, not the film cameramen. They were part of a different union, so the director, Barry Letts, was like, we gotta make this story, let's film it all on 16mm film. And as a result, it is the only story that we can collect on Blu-ray. How awesome is that? All because of a strike. This is the first Doctor Who story to feature John Pertwee as the 3rd Doctor and Caroline John as companion Liz Shaw, who would go on to appear in 19% of the 3rd Doctor episodes. This is the 3rd time that the Brigadier has appeared in a Doctor Who episode with the Doctor, the other 2 times being The Web of Fear and The Invasion. It is also the first time that the Brigadier has ever met a new regeneration of the Doctor. This is the 3rd time that the Doctor uses the alias of John Smith. The other 2 times were in first in the Wheel in Space and then second in the War Games. This is the first appearance of the Nesting Consciousness and of the Autons, and it is one of 3 appearances in Doctor Who so far. This is the first time that it is mentioned that the Doctor has 2 hearts. This is the 3rd story by Robert Holmes, the other 2 being the Crotons and the Space Pirates, and he would go on to write 12 and a half more. That half is Trial of a Time. This is the beginning of the Doctor's exile to Earth, which would last for another 15 stories, 3 seasons, and 4 years. This is the first of 128 episodes, 5 seasons, and round about 5 years with the 3rd Doctor, earning him a comfortable spot at 2nd place for the longest running Doctor in Doctor Who. This story is the first story in Series 7, which was the first Doctor Who season to have 25 episodes rather than the average of around 40 that the previous 6 seasons had. And it would stay that way all the way up until season 21, with the seasons having an average of 20 to 26 episodes each. You only see the outside of the TARDIS once in Series 7, and you never see the inside of the TARDIS, and that is because producer Barry Letts thought that it looked too worn down to be filmed in color. There is a new title sequence in this episode, and it is the first title sequence to be in color. It was designed by Bernard Lodge, who also designed the 1967 Patrick Troughton titles. In this story, the actor playing the Doctor is credited for the first time as Doctor Who, D-O-C-T-O-R Who, rather than Dr. Who as it had been since 1963. Among the props seen on the Doctor's workbench in this episode was the Morok freezing machine from the Space Museum, which had been recycled as an X-ray laser machine in the Wheel in Space. You also see a control panel from one of Tobias Vaughn's machines from The Invasion. We are now on to the Silurians, which is the first appearance of the Silurians in Doctor Who. Due to a miscommunication with the graphics department, this story is titled Doctor Who and the Silurians. However, it was originally meant to be called the Silurians. This is the first time that we see Bessie, the wonderful yellow speedster that is so loved by the Doctor. This is the first time that we see the use of color separation overlay, better known as green screen. It was probably blue screen though, used in a Doctor Who story. The Silurians had an unusual amount of crew cameos in it, including Terrence Dicks, Barry Letts, and most prominently Trevor Ray in the Marylebone Station scene. That TARDIS wiki effect was quoted from Doctor Who magazine issue 222. Next up is the Ambassadors of Death, which is the first time that we see the TARDIS console in color. This is the first story to feature Benton with the rank of Sergeant Benton. He had previously also appeared in The Invasion. Working titles for this story included The Invaders from Mars, and The Carriers of Death. Factoid number 27, the title sequences in this story are very strange considering that they start out with a normal Doctor Who theme, but after the logo they cut back to the previous week's cliffhanger, and then the titles start up again to show you the story title, the writer's name, and then the episode number. This is the last Doctor Who story that David Whittaker would ever write. He co-wrote it with Trevor Ray, however the last 6 episodes were written by Malcolm Hulke. Factoid number 29, the console was pulled out for studio recording in February of 1970. It had experienced a lot of wear and tear and needed some replacement buttons and knobs and what have you. However, it would last for one more story before it was deemed too damaged and had to undergo a redesign. Speaking of that next story, we are now on to Inferno. It is the 4th and final story of Series 7 of Doctor Who, and it is the last story to feature Caroline John. It was also the first Doctor Who story to explore the concept of parallel worlds. Unfortunately, director Douglas Camfield fell ill after directing episodes 1 and 2, and that left Barry Letts to direct all of the remaining episodes. Several other stories were considered for the finale of Season 7. The Myths of Madness by Brian Wright and The Shadow People by Charlotte and Dennis Plimmer. Those were 2 that were considered. Houghton actually based the story on a real-life drilling project called the Mohole Project, and he couldn't actually find any information about the project or why it was suddenly shut down because all that information was like top secret. So that kind of inspired him when he was writing the story. Letts didn't think that the script was long enough to fill 7 episodes, so things like the Primords and scenes with Venusian Aikido were added to sort of lengthen the story a little bit more, which I'm really glad of because Venusian Aikido is awesome. Speaking of Venusian Aikido appeared in Inferno, The Mind of Evil, The Claws of Axos, The Sea Devils, The Green Death, and Invasion of the Dinosaurs. The Doctor is the only character seen in the story to not have a parallel universe doppelganger. It was later confirmed that the leader, which you only ever really see in a photo, he was the Doctor's counterpart on the parallel universe. Even though Douglas Camfield is credited as a director and did direct like all the location footage in blocks 1 and 2 of the story, blocks 3 and 4 were again directed by Barry Letts. He had to step into the role once again of not only being producer but also being director. Derek Ware, who played Private Wyatt in this story, didn't actually do the scene where his mutated self gets shot and falls off of a cooling tower. That was actually played by Roy Scammell, who interestingly enough played the guy who shot Private Wyatt. You know, I can't confirm that he was a professional stunt person. The role of Petra, which was played by Douglas Camfield's wife, was supposed to be played by Kate O'Mara. She was not available for this role, but she would later go on to play the Ronnie in The Mark of the Ronnie and The Time of the Ronnie and the Sarah Jane Adventures. Caroline John, who plays Liz Shaw, really enjoyed the scenes where she got to play her evil counterpart in a parallel universe. She said that it was a lot more exciting to play the baddie rather than the goodie. Nicholas Courtney really enjoyed playing the parallel version of himself. I mean, who wouldn't? He's got an eye patch and everything. Speaking of eye patches and eye patch mania, in the scene where Nicholas Courtney was supposed to turn around and reveal that he, as the parallel Earth Brigadier, has an eye patch on his eye, according to an interview in Doctor Who magazine, what the cast and crew did was, while he wasn't looking, they all put on eye patches of themselves and shouted action. So he turned us around, the cameras are rolling, and he sees the entire cast and crew with eye patches on their faces. Now the story goes that he just kept going and continued to do the rest of the scene even though the entire crew had eye patches on. Apparently the eye patch story was so commonly associated with Nicholas Courtney that Stephen Moffat actually wrote an entire scene, several scenes in The Wedding of River Song where everybody is wearing an eye patch in honor of Nicholas Courtney, who had died that year. How sweet is that? I never would have known that. John Pertwee is afraid of heights. And another thing you may not know is that Roger Delgado, who played the Master, is afraid of water. We're all afraid of something. I'm actually afraid of frogs and toads. I know it's crazy, but I just wanted to share my fear while we were on the subject. Moving on, this was the last story to feature the original TARDIS console that had been there since William Hartnell and through Patrick Troughton, but it was finally just too degraded. It had to be, it was unfortunately thrown away and junked, much like the William Hartnell and Patrick Troughton episodes, but we won't get into that. It was gotten rid of and a new one designed by Kenneth Sharp was used in The Claws of Axos. Factoid number 46 brings us to Season 8, which was meant to be kind of a soft reboot for the John Pertwee era, with a lot of overarching plots brought out in the season, most noticeably the Master appearing in all 5 stories in this season. We have now moved on to Doctor Who Terror of the Autons. Now this was the first story to feature Roger Delgado as the Master and just the Master character in general. It's the first story to feature Katie Manning as Jo Grant, who would go on to appear in 60% of the Third Doctor's episodes. This story was the first story since the 1967 Tomb of the Cybermen to bring in more viewers with every episode of the story. Robert Holmes is back, and with him he brings the Time Lords, which haven't been seen since Doctor Who The War Games. This story was the first to not feature credits for a director. Now this was because Barry Letts once again was acting as producer and director. Now he got permission from his boss so that he could actually get paid for being a producer and a director at the same time. But due to rules at the BBC, he couldn't be credited also as a director. But he's the guy who directed Terror of the Autons. And the Master is the third Time Lord that we see in addition to the Doctor in Doctor Who. The first being the Meddling Monk, who appeared in 2 stories in 1965. The second being another Time Lord in this story, who was a Time Lord that came to warn the Doctor that the Master was here on Earth. Other than that, the only other times that we see Time Lords in the Third Doctor's era were in Colony in Space and The Three Doctors. One of the titles for this story was going to be The Spray of Death. Imagine if Terror of the Autons was the Spray of Death. When filming the scene where the Doctor and Jo are escaping from the quarry, the stuntman who was driving the police car misjudged and actually hit stuntman Terry Walsh, who was playing the Auton policeman. He was knocked right off of the hill where he was standing, however he was able to stand right up and continue the scene. Due to the fact that the fall looked so amazing and the fact that he was able to get right back up, they kept the scene in the final edit. That's crazy, that wasn't planned at all. We are now on to The Mind of Evil, and this story actually went way over budget, maybe due to the fact that they actually hired a real helicopter. This story had the working title of Man-Hours, The Pandora Machine, The Pandora Box, and The Pandora's Box. This is one of only 8 stories in all of Doctor Who to not feature the TARDIS in the episode whatsoever. Those 8 stories are Mission to the Unknown, Doctor Who and the Silurians, The Demons, The Sea Devils, The Centauran Experiment, Genesis of the Daleks, and Midnight. The Master is back in this story and would continue to return in all of the stories in Series 8. This was the first time in Doctor Who history that you had the same villain for every story in a season. The Claws of Axos had multiple working titles, including Doctor Who and the Gift, The Friendly Invasion, The Axons, and The Vampire from Space. And for some unexplained reason, Terror of the Autons, The Mind of Evil, and The Claws of Axos all had the second Doctor's theme music. Did y'all notice that? I didn't. One of the Axon costumes would be painted green and reused in Doctor Who The Seeds of Doom. Whoa, is that an Axon monster from The Claws of Axos? It's like, no, it's painted green, completely different. Apparently there's a common myth that there are scenes from the interior of a car where color separation overlay or green screen was used, but that was in fact just the blue sky that you see behind them, and it just really looks like color separation overlay. Factoid number 63, this is the first time that we see the TARDIS travel to another planet since the Time Lords banished the Doctor in the War Games. However, this was only under the Time Lords' control. It would be until the Three Doctors much later when the Doctor would finally be able to travel to other planets of his own free will. We come to the final story that I'll be talking about today, which is Doctor Who The Demons. The Daemons? The Demons? The Daemons? That story. This was written by Guy Leopold, which is a pseudonym for Robert Sloman and Barry Letts. Barry Letts is also a writer. Like, what? Man of many hats. I wonder if he has a fez. The incantation that the Master speaks is actually just Mary had a little lamb spoken backwards. Malam, Bamal, no. Yamram. Anyway, in a featurette called Terrence Dick's Fact or Fiction that is included on the Horror of Fang Rock DVD, Terrence Dicks reveals that as script editor for this story, he cut out the famous line, "Chap with wings 5 rounds rapid." However, it was reinstated at writer Barry Lett's request. Season 8 of Doctor Who was originally supposed to be 26 episodes, and that was what Barry Letts was instructed to create by the BBC. And that would have meant that the Demons would have been 6 episodes long. However, due to production difficulties, it ended up being a 5-part story. This is the only televised Doctor Who story to feature a typographical literature in its title, and that is the AE in this title, so like that right there. This is one of only 8 Doctor Who stories, again, that did not feature the TARDIS. Episode 2 of this story was the 300th episode of Doctor Who. What a way to end this list. If you are now subscribed to Jay's Doctor Who reviews, you've got to see his videos on the brief history of Doctor Who, his audio adventures, his news updates. It is just incredible. If you want to grow your Doctor Who knowledge collection and most importantly your connection with other Doctor Who fans, then definitely subscribe to join the Doctor Who Guide community, and I will see you in the next video. Bye!